Now, let me introduce Dr. Wu. Fengyu has recently joined Static Research to work as a researcher in the economics of well-being. Her research focuses on the determinants of health and subjective well-being. And in particular, she has worked on the effects of both economic and social conditions such as income, consumption, interpersonal comparison, and social capital in determining well-being. Fengyu also serves as associate editor for the Journal of Happiness Studies and as book review editor for the International Journal of Happiness and Development. She is also one of the founding members of the China Happiness Report. Fengyu received her PhD in economics from the University of Southern California. Before joining us here at Static Research, she was a lecturer at the Singapore Management University, and she also held academic positions in the United States, Hong Kong, and China. As you see, Fengyu is quite an accomplished scholar, and we are very, very happy to have her working with us at Static Research. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Fengyu for her presentation.
Sure.
Thank you, Fengyu.
Thank you very much, Francesco, for this great introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Fengyu Wu, and today I'm very happy to have this opportunity to present my recent works on China at our Measuring Progress seminar series. And today, the topic is Happiness in an Aging Society, Insights and Implications from China. Population aging is recognized by the United Nations as one of the most significant global challenges in the 21st century, together with, for instance, big data for sustainable development, climate change, gender equality, and international migration. So why is global population aging important to study? Here are some quotes from a few important international organizations. According to the World Bank, population aging is a defining demographic trend of the 21st century with profound implications for social, economic, and political structures around the world. According to International Monetary Fund, global population aging presents complex challenges, including increased demand for healthcare, pension systems under strain, and shifts in labor markets. According to the World Health Organization, population aging is not just a challenge, it's also an opportunity. By harnessing the skills, experience, and wisdom of older adults, societies can unlock new sources of productivity, innovation, and social cohesion. Now let's take a quick look at the current situation of global population aging. Let's start by reviewing the definition of population aging. There are, in fact, a few definitions, and in this presentation, I will rely on one popular definition, which is defined by the World Assembly on Aging held in Vienna in 1982. It says that when the proportion of people aged 60 and over exceeds 10% of the total population in a country or region, it signals the onset of population aging. And this is a figure showing the percentage of people aged 60 and above by world region in 2021. The data come from the World Population Prospects 2022, which is also the latest edition by the United Nations. And here we see for the whole world, on average, the percentage of older adults is at 13.7%, and Europe is ranked at the top at 26%, followed by North America, Oceania, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and Africa. And Africa is the only world region that hasn't transitioned to this demographic phase. And nearly 2/3 of the countries worldwide have now transitioned into the era of population aging. So what's the trend over time? On your left-hand side is a figure showing the percentage of older adults by world region from 1950 to 2021. And here we observe the ranking in the percentage of older adults has been mostly stable across time, especially after the 1960s. And the upward trend in the percentage has been observed in all regions since the 1960s, except for Africa. If we look at the population level, we find that Asia has been ranked at the top in the population size of older adults. And the growth in the population of older adults in Asia has accelerated in the past 10 to 20 years. And this quite remarkable growth is largely due to the recent rapid aging situation in China. So let's take a closer look at China's aging population. China's older population is the world's largest, and the estimate is 258 million individuals of age 60 and above in 2021. It's about 60% of the total population in all EU countries, 80% of the population in the whole United States, and twice as large as the total population in Japan. And China has transitioned to an aging society in 2000, and it is now among the nations experiencing rapid population aging. At the local level within mainland China, 30 out of its 31 provincial regions have entered the phase of population aging, and this is according to the China's 2020 census. What about the trend? On your left-hand side, I show the population of older adults in mainland China from 1950 to 2021. And we see that mainland China has positive growth in the population of older adults since about 1960. And between 2000 and 2021, the population aged 60 and above in mainland China more than doubled. And on your right-hand side, it's a figure comparing the percentage of older adults in mainland China with the percentage in more developed regions of the world defined by the United Nations, as well as the less developed regions, excluding mainland China. And here we can observe since 2010, the percentage for mainland China has been approaching that of more developed regions worldwide. And the percentage is projected to exceed that of more developed regions before 2050. So because of the rapid aging situation in China, we are motivated to study the well-being of older adults in China. And in this presentation, I'm going to discuss the subjective well-being of older adults in China. And specifically, I'm going to focus on one dimension, which is life evaluations measured by overall happiness, overall life satisfaction, and satisfaction domains. First, there are a few reasons for studying the subjective well-being of older adults. One of the reasons for population aging is the increase in life expectancy. However, longevity doesn't always mean a better quality of life. And there has been increased attention to the concept of successful aging. And satisfaction with life is widely considered as a key aspect. Second, subjective well-being is considered both a cause and a consequence of various things in life, such as health outcomes, social cohesion and intergenerational relationships, and productivity and participation in activities. Third, we think that understanding factors impacting older adults' subjective well-being can inform effective policies and intervention. And why we want to study China? Since China is the world's second largest economy and the home to the largest older population globally, studying subjective well-being among older adults in China offers insight into global aging challenges and opportunities. Besides, studying subjective well-being in China allows for cross-cultural comparisons and learning, both for the East and for the West. Let's first look at the age pattern. This figure shows you happiness over the life course by gender in China. And this is taken from a chapter in the China Happiness Report 2020. And the data come from China Household Finance Survey 2017. And in this case, our subjective well-being measure is overall happiness based on the question, overall, do you feel happy these days? The response scale ranges from 1 to 5, with a higher value representing a higher level of happiness. So here, this figure shows us a clear U shape of happiness over the life course for both males and females. And this finding is in fact consistent with much of the empirical literature on happiness and age in both developing and developed countries. And in the case of China, we find that the lowest point is at around age 47 for women and 41 for men. And older men and women are happier than middle-aged and younger individuals on average. Besides, women are happier than men before the middle age, and their happiness levels become similar thereafter. And one important highlight for today's presentation is that happiness increases with age after 60. But does this finding hold if we use another data set with another life evaluation measure? Here, this figure shows you the mean life satisfaction among Chinese older adults by socio-demographic characteristics. And the figure is taken from our chapter, Happiness in the Aging Society in the China Happiness Report 2020. And the data come from China Health and Retirement Longitudinal Study, 2011, 2013, and 2015, with respondents age 60 and above. And here, our subjective well-being measure is the overall life satisfaction based on the question, please think about your life as a whole. How satisfied are you with it? Are you completely satisfied, very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not very satisfied, or not at all satisfied? And response scale also ranges from 1 to 5, with a higher level representing a higher level of life satisfaction. And because of time constraint, we're going to focus on the age pattern here. And we find that the average life satisfaction seems to monotonically increase with age for Chinese adults age 60 and above. Okay, Next, we would like to explore the correlates of subjective well-being among Chinese older adults. And before I explain you the analysis and present the results, I would like to introduce first the distribution of our 4 subjective well-being measures. Here we see overall life satisfaction, satisfaction with your relationships with children, satisfaction with marriage, and satisfaction with your health. And we find that 3 of the 4 measures are left-skewed, and they are life satisfaction, satisfaction with your relationship with your children, and satisfaction with your marriage. And this is consistent with the existing literature. And we also find interesting satisfaction, the distribution for satisfaction with health is somewhat symmetric. And here, a very satisfied or somewhat satisfied was mostly chosen in all 4 questions on satisfaction. Okay, let's now delve into the correlates of subjective well-being among Chinese older adults. We are going to look at 5 dimensions. Health, early life experiences are considered more internal. Social participation, social safety net, and family support are considered more external. And what we did is that we run regression analysis with outcome variables being the 4 measures on subjective well-being, and our key independent variables of interest are variables on these 5 dimensions. And we use socio-demographic characteristics along with survey year fixed effects and community fixed effects as our controls. Okay, now let's look at health, which is considered one of the most important dimensions of subjective well-being in general. And here in this figure, I present the coefficients on all the health variables, as well as the effect of doubling of household expenditures per capita for comparison. Here we investigate several dimensions of health of older adults, including self-reported health, functional limitation, chronic disease, mental health, cognitive functioning, and health behavior. And in general, we find all of the adverse health conditions are significantly and negatively associated with overall life satisfaction of older adults. Specifically, we find mental illness is the main contributor, and we see that the negative effect of a higher level of depressive symptoms is 16 times as large as the positive effect of doubling household expenditures per capita. And regarding domain satisfaction, we find health satisfaction is a domain that's mostly related to various health conditions. And having chronic disease, chronic conditions, and having higher levels of depressive symptoms are also negatively correlated with older adults' marriage satisfaction and children satisfaction. Next, we look into early life experiences, which can be considered important to later life well-being. Here we see that in our sample of older adults, about 84% of them ever experienced famine in life, and about 95% of them had an illiterate parent. About 9% of them had poor health at childhood, and about 27% of them had ever mistreated by parents. And we see that famine experience and poor health at childhood are significantly and negatively associated with overall life satisfaction. Most importantly, the effect of poor health at childhood is around 2.5 times as large as the positive influence of doubling household expenditures per capita. And we also see that these two factors, family experience and poor health at childhood, are significantly negatively associated with their health satisfaction in later life. And poor health at childhood, as well as mistreatment by parents, are also negatively associated with their satisfaction with marriage or children. Another interesting finding is that the effects of adverse early life experiences are not fully mediated by current conditions. This means early life experiences are important to later life subjective well-being independent of current life conditions. Okay, next, we look into social participation, social safety net, and subjective well-being. In our sample of older adults, there are 48% of them participated in social activities in the past year. And for social safety net, around 77% of the older adults are participating or receiving public pensions, and almost 94% of them are enrolled in public health insurance. And we find that participating in social activities is positively and significantly associated with life satisfaction in general. And its effect size is 1.5 times as large as the effect of doubling household expenditures per capita. And for social safety net, we only find that participating or receiving a public pension is positively and significantly associated with their life satisfaction. But enrollment in public health insurance is not significantly associated. We think there are two potential reasons. First, it's because of the almost universal coverage. Second, there may be heterogeneity in the effects of different types of public health insurance, and this would require further investigation. Okay, now we look at family support, which is considered vital because of a cultural tradition emphasizing family hierarchy and relationships in China. Here, we look into two types of support: structural support and functional support. Structural support measures include the number of daughters, the number of sons, and living arrangements. Functional support includes weekly visits of children, and the availability of help here means help with self-care and household tasks from family if needed, whether you give care to your grandchildren, and the exchanges of financial transfer with children. And we find that the number of living sons, the availability of help from family if needed, as well as financial transfer from children are positively associated with overall life satisfaction. Specifically, we find the positive effect of the availability of help from family is more than 7 times as large as the positive influence of doubling household expenditures per capita. And we also find the availability of personal help is also positively associated with older adults' marriage satisfaction and their children's satisfaction. Another interesting finding is that financial transfer to children is also positively and significantly associated with parents' satisfaction with their relationship with children. Okay, since we believe that family support, especially intergenerational support, is important in the Chinese context, In this recently published paper, I investigate the relationship between intergenerational support and life satisfaction of older parents in China. And in this case, I focus on the rural-urban differences. So why it's important to study rural-urban disparity in the Chinese context? The degree to which the well-being of older parents relies on their children is indeed related to the rural-urban gaps in economic, social, and policy development in contemporary China. And from the economic perspective, the economic reforms since 1978 have revitalized the economy and created jobs in cities. And this has widened the income gap between rural and urban areas. From the social perspective, the opening of the country has attracted foreign investment and stimulated the spread of Western values in cities. And from the policy perspective, a number of economic and social policies, such as the family planning policies and policies on social safety net, are mostly attached to individuals' hukou or household registration status. And around the same time period, we observe the trend of living separately from children of older adults in both urban and rural areas. Traditionally, Chinese older parents lived with their oldest sons even after his marriage and the birth of his children. Even though this type of stem family structure is still the most common household structure in China, and the number of non-traditional households has grown substantially. For instance, empty nest households where grandparents live by themselves. Skip generation households where grandparents live with their grandchildren only. And network households where children and older parents live separately but nearby. And here, this figure shows you shows that the proportion of each type of non-traditional living arrangement in China increased between 2011 and 2013. Most significantly, for the empty nest households, the percentage increased by 7.3 percentage points in rural China and 5.8 percentage points in urban China within these 2 years. Now, let me briefly present the results given the time constraint. In general, we find a rural-urban divide in the relationships between intergenerational support and life satisfaction. For family size and gender composition of children, we find that a larger family size and having sons only are positively associated with parents' life satisfaction. But this is in urban China. But for rural China, we didn't find any relationship between the family size, gender composition of children, and life satisfaction. For living arrangement, we find for rural parents, living with grandchildren is the key. This means living in skip generation or 3-generation households is associated with a higher level of life satisfaction. For rural parents, living in skip generation households seems to be less favorable than living in other types of households. Regarding functional support, we find for rural parents, receiving help with self-care and household tasks, as well as the exchanges of financial and emotional support with children are associated with a higher level of life satisfaction. However, for urban China, we see that only receiving help with self-care and household tasks is associated with a higher level of life satisfaction. It seems that China's development has at least partially broken down the historical associations between intergenerational support and well-being in both urban and rural China. The results presented so far are all associational, and it would be preferred if we have some causal analysis. So in this mostly published paper, we take a further step and look into the association between structural support and subjective well-being of older parents in China by investigating the causal impacts of having daughters. So why is it important to investigate the impact of child gender in the Chinese context? China has traditional preference for sons, not only because of the Confucian culture, but also because of the essential role of sons in traditional agricultural societies. However, since the 1980s market-oriented reforms, the traditional significance of sons has been challenged. On the one hand, production activities now rely more on markets and enterprises rather than families and community networks. On the other hand, economic activities have become less dependent on physical strength, so the relative value of sons has declined. And there are also a few reasons sons may not necessarily improve older parents' well-being, even in a society with strong son preference. Sons are more likely to live with their parents. However, this coresidence may cause conflicts in larger families. And to exchange for old age support, parents may sacrifice leisure time to take care of their sons' young children. Besides, parents might receive more and better care from their daughters because daughters are often trained as the main caregiver because of the social norms. Let me now briefly describe our empirical strategy. So our assumption in this paper is that without any intervention, the nature determines the gender of each birth, while people determine the number of children. And our empirical strategy is based on this randomness assumption, which is conditional on the number of births. The gender of each birth within a family is random. However, there is a main concern, which is child gender may not be random because of selective abortion and the infanticide. So here we focus on urban parents for two main reasons. First, urban mothers usually gave birth in hospitals where infanticide is too risky to commit. Second, stronger preference for sons in urban China would encourage more selective abortions and infanticides. And we further restrict our sample to the cohort born between 1930 and 1950. These are the cohort who can hardly have access to ultrasound technology in China. And this figure simply checked the balance in the child sex ratio by parents cohort and to validate the sample of our selection. Let me now briefly go through the results and the mechanisms underlying the results. In general, we find daughters promote older parents' life satisfaction as well as satisfaction with health and satisfaction with their relationships with children, Specifically, having an additional daughter relative to a son leads to a 0.04 increase in older parents' life satisfaction, and this is equivalent to 5.5% of the standard deviation of life satisfaction. And we investigate 3 potential mechanisms, including health, intergenerational support, and employment and living conditions. And we find that all these 3 mechanisms are at work. Specifically, we find mental health measured by CESD is the most important mediator. It explains 46% of the total effect of having daughters on older parents' life satisfaction. Besides, financial transfer from children and leisure expenditures are also significant mediators, but with smaller magnitudes. Let me quickly wrap up today's presentation. First, on the key takeaways, the important factors for the subjective well-being of older parents in China. First of all, the greatest attention should be paid to health, especially mental health of older parents. Second, the society should maintain its focus on the health and development of younger generations because early life conditions can influence later life subjective well-being. Third, children should still be encouraged to provide support, especially help with self-care and household tasks to their parents. Fourth, the aging society in China, together with the declining family support, highlight the need for affordable long-term care to become a government priority. Fifth, older adults should be motivated to participate more in social activities. Next, the takeaways on intergenerational support and subjective well-being of older parents or older adults. We argue that tailored policies are needed to enhance the well-being of older parents in both rural and urban China. And second, preference for some due to social norms is actually pretty common in many developing countries. And this leads to gender inequality in many dimensions, such as education, employment, and self-autonomy. And our study on the importance of child gender kind of suggests that parents should invest more equally in sons and daughters, even in cultures with strong son preference. Finally, I would like to highlight a few potential implications for the West. First, there are few things in common in people's well-being across cultures. For instance, the importance of health and social participation or social capital. Second, in order to better understand the factors influencing well-being, it's kind of essential for us to analyze shifts in economic development, societal structures, and public policies. Last but not least, we should continue to promote gender equality. It's not only the morally right thing to do, but also it contributes to the well-being of societies. That's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Fengyu, for this very interesting and rich presentation, and also for being perfectly on time. So we are now left with about 15 minutes for Q&A. So I encourage all the participants to either raise their virtual hands if they want to ask a question, or to drop the question in the chat, and we will read it to you.
Okay.
Perhaps in the meantime, I think there was really a lot in this presentation. I'm sure that people will need some time to let it sink.
Okay.
I have several questions. So one that kind of struck me is something that you hinted at during your presentation, is the fact that people's ability to make it to old age depends on their life experience in early stages. And therefore, the question that I have is, we are observing the transition to an aging society for China. But the composition of this aging society might differ in the sense that it might be mainly constituted of people that were born let's say right after the Second World War, or around after the Second World War. And well, there will be more and more also people coming from cohorts born around the transition to capitalism around 1980s and 1990s. So it's still too early for them to be 60s. But I wonder to what extent the experience of different systems might affect people's ability to make it to old age. I'm not sure I've been clear with my question. Basically, here what I'm saying is that you will have at some point a cohort of Chinese people that has experienced the transition to capitalism in the 80s and 90s, and they might have been experienced to economic, social, and cultural transformation that could have an impact on their probability to make it to old age. And it would be interesting to see if there is indeed such an impact.
You mean you are worried about the survival bias, or whether we can observe them in the sample, or?
Well, your sample, there may be survival bias there, because those who have experienced a better condition in their young lives might have higher chances to be still alive today. But what I'm speaking also is a comparison among cohorts, because older cohorts, those that are old now, have been grown up in period and socialized in a period that is significantly different from what the cohorts that was born in around the 80s or perhaps even in the 60s are experiencing. So what I'm saying is that there can be a different impact of the condition experience at the beginning on the survival. And I wonder if you will still observe such transition to an aging society once we move on with the cohorts.
I think so in the analysis, because in the China Happiness Report, when we were doing that, we only have two waves, which is 2011 and 2013, and I think the average birth year, if I remember correctly, it's around 1948, perhaps. Yeah, I need to double check, but it's around. It might be around the founding of the People's Republic of China. I agree with you that people in different cohorts might experience different, should have experienced different things. So it would be interesting if we do more look into the subsamples in detail. We may find more interesting findings. But here we control for like early life experience, such as experience, whether you ever experience famine, and this is also might indicate the period of your cohort, because we had the Great Famine around 1958 to 1960 something. So when they were young, they would, I mean, people born after that wouldn't experience famine. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a question from Chiara.
Yes.
It's a clarification question. Chiara, would you like to read it for us?
Yeah. Hi, thanks for the presentation, Fengyu. I have this clarification question. I'm under the impression that when you look at the early life experience and conditions, this seems not to matter much for subjective well-being later in life. So it seems to me that the confidence interval is including the zero. And the coefficients are not significant, or am I misunderstanding the results? Thanks.
So thanks very much for the question. So here, I can perhaps again share the screen a little bit. So here we see this on this slide. You're right. For instance, for the Great Famine experience, it's statistically significant at the 10% level, but not 5% level. For the poor health at childhood, it's also only statistically significant at 10% level. So I would call it marginally significant, but remember, these coefficients are after we already control for later life experience, for instance, current health and other current, say, marital status or current employment status. So I would say some of the effects might already be mediated by the current adulthood outcomes, but independently, even after control for the current life outcomes, they are marginally significant.
Thank you, Fengyu.
Thank you. Thanks for the
I
question.
see that Christopher raised his hand. Chris, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you. That was a very wide-ranging, interesting talk. My question is a little off topic. I wonder if you could give us a little bit of an overview of measurement of life satisfaction in China and maybe what the prospects are. So, are there mainline surveys that are regularly measuring life satisfaction, and can we expect those to more of those in the future?
Yes, yes. Thanks very much for the question, Chris. And I'm not sure whether how many in the audience are familiar with the surveys in China, but we in fact have quite a few nationally representative surveys, either for the general population or for some specific populations, such as older population in China. For example, the survey I presented in this presentation is a China Health and Retirement Longitudinal Study, which started in 2011 and is conducted biannually. And it's going to be continued, and you would consider it's like assistance survey of share or HRS. So it would be comparable to other international surveys on aging. And also we have China Family Panel Study, which would be a sister survey of, say, PSID in the United States. So it's for general population. It also has happiness question in that. Actually, I think for journals, there is also a general social survey in China, which also has happiness question. I think for now, it's maybe around 10 years. I need to double check, but there are, I would say, a lot of emerging surveys in the past 10 years, 10 to 20 years, that because I would say household surveys started relatively late for China compared to Western countries. So when they started the survey, they already realized the importance of measuring people's subjective well-being. So they usually had this measure from the very beginning. So I would say I expect there will be an increasing number of studies on Chinese people's subjective well-being in the near future. I hope I answer your question. Thanks.
Thank you. I see there's another in the chat.
Yes, there is one question from Vasia. Vasia, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes. Let's go. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So Fengyu, thanks a lot for your presentation. It was very broad and very informative. I like that it kind of summarizes also the main findings in the literature in an indirect way, but really quite nice.
Thanks.
And what surprised me and what I learned from it is that actually adverse early life conditions seem to also affect, or at least they're associated with one's satisfaction with his or her own children and marriage. And this kind of surprised me a bit. And I was wondering, do you care to speculate a bit on the mechanism, or if this could be perhaps also partly related to how it affects, let's say, the likelihood of being depressed later in life, or if this is a mediating factor, or if you're thinking about something else? Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for this inspiring question. Yeah, we haven't done any mediation analysis for adverse life experiences and life satisfaction later in life, except control for the later life, say, conditions. But let me see what. Yeah, I think here in this case, I'm not sure whether I explain myself in the presentation, but we also control for the mental illness in the same regression. So I would say it's after we control for health, we control for family support and other factors that we still find early life experience play a strong role.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's super interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question.
Thank you, Vasia. For the time being, unless of my mistakes, I don't see any further hands raised or questions in the chat. I would still leave people some time to think. In the meantime, I would like probably to profit of my position as a host and ask you another question.
Sure.
Because I admit I don't know much about China, and this is a great opportunity to ask. So I understand there is a well-being divide between elderly people in rural and urban China, and that as the main correlates of this well-being seems to be health, especially mental health, and social involvement. I wonder if there are differences in the social involvement and of people in rural and urban China. Do they have a similar do they do similar activities, or do they have different kind of networks from which they can draw benefit? I would like to know more about what kind of activities matter for the well-being of elderly people in rural and urban China.
Well, this is a very, very interesting question. I'm afraid in the survey, unfortunately, they didn't ask whether an individual did a particular type of activity. They would ask in the list of like 20 activities whether you have done any in the past year, such as play mahjong, go to community clubs. So it's asked to all the participants, and it's so without any detailed survey questions, it's hard to tell. But in my personal impression for rural and urban China, and I would agree with you, people in urban and rural China have very different social activities. For instance, in urban China, many middle-aged ladies would do dancing in plaza, which is quite common as their social activity. But in rural areas, they might not have this opportunity, or they might not have a proper instructor for that. So yeah, I agree with you. it's an interesting issue to investigate.
I should definitely visit China at some point in my life, because a related question is the following. So a common problem in most Western big cities is that the more fragile segment of the society, the elderly and the young children, become very much dependent on people in working age for their activities, simply because they are not autonomous. I wonder, what is the situation in urban China? Do elderly people manage to be autonomous in their movements, in meeting their friends, or do they have to depend on the younger generations
That's also
for their socialization?
That's also a very important question, but because that's my opinion, because Chinese adults relatively retired at an early age. Like for men, it's 60. For women, it's at latest 55. So that's the legal retirement age. So when they are retired, they still have actually enough energy to support themselves. And also, there are some weird situations now, at least I think from my observation in urban China, many young adults young adults from the age of 20 to the age of say 35 or 40 or even 40, since when they cannot participate actively in the labor market, given some worse labor market condition, they may rely on their parents' pension. Because in urban China, I think when they reach retirement, for a large proportion of urban parents, their pension may be as much as, or at least like 70 to 80% of their previous wage. So we do have, I think, a relatively wealthy older population at this moment.
Very interesting. Thank you for your answer and your insights, Fengyu. I see that Alessio Rebecchi raised his hand. Alessio, would you like to unmute yourself, please?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for your presentation. I was just wondering if you could give us an idea how China does internationally, in the sense that on the usual ranking of well-being among the older population, how China does compared to other countries, especially in the Southeast Asia, for example.
You mean you mean subjective well-being or other aspect compared to?
No, subjective well-being among this specific sector of the population, if there is an international ranking that we can compare China to other countries, for example.
Oh, that's a great question. I think for me, I didn't do this kind of ranking, but the World Happiness Report 2024, this year's report, actually did this type of ranking.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, China actually did not bad in older population. It's ranked higher relatively compared to its performance in, say, the general population or younger population. And I think you would be interested to check the ranking from the report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question.
Great. So we are quickly approaching the end of the time allotted for this seminar. But just before finishing, I would like to perhaps give the opportunity for a last question to Zamira Podi-Hirsch, who also raised a hand. Okay. Zamira, would you like to?
Do you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Interesting, and it is a little bit very similar to my
I'm sorry, Zamira. Could you speak closer to the microphone because your voice is jumping?
Do you hear me better?
No.
Yes, let's try.
More stable, yes.
Oh, okay. So I find your presentation a little bit similar to what is happening now in my country, but it is more that people are leaving due to economic, attraction of European Union, from Albania coming to Germany or France and so on. But I would like to know if there is any correlation between rich families and poor families in China. If you have any deviation, how is the respect shared in this process?
You mean
between children and parents? So do you have any variation, any discovery that drives your attention between rich families or extremely poor families? So how is the satisfaction of all people or people in general?
Thanks very much for the question. I think for now, I don't have a clear answer, but I think when I did the analysis, for China, it's still a higher, in this case, a higher level of total household expenditures is related to life satisfaction, but the magnitude is not very large. So currently we see its other aspects such as family support, such as intergenerational support. I mean, this is in the Chinese context. Family support, health, social activities, they probably matter more to Chinese older parents. But I would say if we focus on a population of extreme poverty, we would find perhaps other interesting things. Yes, thanks very much.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Fengyu, for sharing your insights with us and for taking the time to answer to our question. It was a very insightful and interesting presentation. I think we ran out of time. I want to thank you and all the attendees for joining us today. And I look forward to meeting all of you again next time. I wish you all a pleasant evening.
Thanks very much for attending the presentation. Nice meeting all of you online. Thanks very much.